In a dramatic escalation of legal warfare between political figures and mainstream media, former Trump campaign spokeswoman Karoline Leavitt has filed a second high-profile lawsuit against the producers and co-hosts of the long-running ABC talk show The View, alleging a pattern of targeted defamation and reputational harm. This latest lawsuit, significantly more aggressive than the first, has reportedly triggered severe financial stress within the network, sparking internal concerns that the legal fallout could ultimately bankrupt the production or force its cancellation. According to insiders familiar with ABC's legal team, this lawsuit accuses the show of deliberate falsehoods, intentional malice, and orchestrated efforts to damage Leavitt's professional credibility. The claims are centered on specific comments made by co-hosts Sunny Hostin, Joy Behar, and Whoopi Goldberg during a live broadcast earlier this year, comments which Leavitt's attorneys argue were not only false, but constructed with prior knowledge of their inaccuracy. The case represents a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle between conservative public figures and legacy media institutions and may reshape how opinion-based programming handles politically sensitive subjects. For Leavitt, the stakes are personal and political. For The View, they are existential. The conflict began more than a year ago, during the heated political build-up to the 2024 presidential election, in which Karoline Leavitt emerged as a prominent and outspoken voice defending Donald Trump and conservative causes. As a communications advisor and media surrogate, Leavitt appeared regularly across right-leaning networks and digital platforms, rapidly gaining a following for her sharp-tongued critiques of left-leaning media and democratic policies. Her combative style drew applause from her political allies and fierce pushback from critics. Among the most vocal detractors were the co-hosts of The View, who repeatedly used their platform to criticize Leavitt's rhetoric, challenge her assertions, and question her motives. Tensions came to a head in a mid-2024 episode of the show in which Hostin accused Leavitt of knowingly promoting lies about the election and described her as a dangerous figure for democracy. Behar chimed in, suggesting that Leavitt was part of the disinformation machine and alleging that she had direct ties to January 6 organizers. These comments, though framed as opinion, were broadcast to millions of viewers and quickly went viral on social media. Leavitt's team immediately responded with a public statement condemning the remarks and warning of legal action. In the weeks that followed, her legal team gathered what they claimed to be overwhelming evidence of defamation, including internal communications from The View's production staff, social media amplification efforts, and press interviews in which the hosts doubled down on their claims. The initial lawsuit filed later that year focused on damages to Leavitt's reputation, arguing that her career had suffered irreparable harm due to false associations with criminal activity and extremism. That first case was still winding its way through pretrial motions when a second incident triggered what would become the current, more explosive lawsuit. During a panel discussion on political disinformation, the hosts once again invoked Leavitt by name, this time in reference to a new wave of misinformation surrounding ballot harvesting and voter fraud. Behar repeated the assertion that Leavitt specializes in conspiracy theories, while Goldberg commented, "She's part of the reason we can't have real conversations about elections anymore." In legal filings, Leavitt's attorneys assert that these statements were factually baseless, defamatory, and intended to destroy her public credibility as she pursued higher-profile political roles. What makes this lawsuit particularly damaging for The View is the way it leverages legal precedent and circumstantial evidence to build a case not just of negligence, but of malicious intent. Unlike standard defamation suits, which are notoriously difficult for public figures to win, Leavitt's claim hinges on the idea that the hosts and producers acted with full knowledge of the falsity of their statements. Her legal team cites emails, pre-show scripts, and segment planning documents in which the language about Leavitt was allegedly discussed, debated, and finalized with the understanding that it could be legally problematic. If proven, this would meet the strict actual malice threshold required for public figures to prevail in defamation lawsuits. Leavitt's lawyers have also requested access to unaired footage and internal memos, hoping to uncover a pattern of editorial bias against conservative voices. While ABC has moved to block these subpoenas, legal analysts suggest that the court may allow discovery to proceed, especially given the high-profile nature of the case and the national interest in transparency from major media institutions. Financially, the implications are already being felt. ABC has reportedly set aside tens of millions in potential litigation reserves, and insurance providers are said to be in active negotiation over who bears responsibility for legal costs and potential payouts. Some insiders claim the lawsuit has already triggered conversations at Disney, ABC's parent company, about restructuring or even discontinuing The View if the legal exposure becomes too great. The network's strategy so far has been cautious. No direct statements have been made on air, and producers have instructed hosts to avoid discussing the lawsuit or referring to Leavitt in future broadcasts. Off-camera, however, the tone is reportedly tense. Staff meetings have shifted focus from content development to legal risk management. And morale among the hosts is said to be low, with some feeling hung out to dry by corporate leadership. The show, once considered untouchable in daytime television, now finds itself under siege, not by ratings or cultural backlash, but by a methodically built legal case that threatens to collapse its foundation. Public response to the lawsuit has followed predictable ideological lines. Conservative media outlets have championed Leavitt as a fearless figure willing to take on media behemoths and demand accountability. Commentators on Fox News, Newsmax, and The Daily Wire have framed the lawsuit as a long-overdue check on liberal media bias, arguing that The View has operated for too long without consequences. Among her supporters, Leavitt is being celebrated as a modern-day David standing up to a Goliath that has silenced countless conservative voices through ridicule, distortion, and personal attacks. On the other hand, progressive media figures have denounced the lawsuit as a form of legal intimidation, warning that it sets a dangerous precedent that could chill political speech and erode protections for editorial commentary. Groups like the ACLU and PE in America have voiced concern about the broader implications of the case, suggesting that a victory for Leavitt could have a ripple effect across the industry, making media outlets more vulnerable to lawsuits anytime they criticize political figures. Still, even some critics acknowledge that The View may have crossed a line in its handling of Leavitt, particularly given the personal nature of some of the on-air remarks. As the lawsuit moves forward, key moments will include judicial rulings on discovery access and pretrial motions to dismiss. If the case proceeds to trial, it could be one of the most closely watched defamation cases in recent history, not just because of the money involved, but because of what it says about the evolving relationship between politics and media. Leavitt's legal team is also preparing for a possible settlement offer, but sources close to her inner circle say she is unlikely to accept anything short of a full public retraction and significant financial compensation. Her larger goal, they argue, is not just personal vindication, but systemic change, forcing media companies to recalibrate how they discuss and depict political opponents. This strategy mirrors a broader legal trend among conservative figures, who increasingly view lawsuits as a tool not only for accountability but for influence. Whether that trend strengthens or backfires depends in large part on how this case is resolved. In the meantime, Leavitt has continued to grow her public profile, using the lawsuit as a springboard for greater visibility. She's appeared at conservative political events, launched a podcast discussing media ethics, and hinted at future ambitions that go beyond communications roles. Some within the Republican establishment see her as a potential congressional candidate, while others speculate she may take on a high-ranking role in the next presidential campaign. Whatever her next move, it is clear that the lawsuit has elevated her standing within the party and earned her admiration among grassroots conservatives. The View, by contrast, is facing the most sustained institutional crisis in its history. Once a fixture of mainstream television, it now stands at the edge of collapse, not because of declining viewership or cultural irrelevance, but because it may have underestimated the legal and political firepower of a woman determined not to be dismissed or defamed. The battle lines are drawn. On one side, a rising conservative figure armed with legal precedent, media savvy, and growing political influence. On the other, a long-running television institution suddenly vulnerable in ways it never imagined. The outcome of this legal fight will not only determine the future of The View, but will send a message to every major media outlet in the country: accountability cuts both ways. If even the most established shows can be financially crippled by a well-executed lawsuit, the rules of E!